Hi, I'm Nadine. My parents didn't just turn their backs on me, they filed papers to take my son from me. In court. Like I was a stranger. They used my worst moments text messages, photos, a voicemail I barely remembered, to build a story where I didn't belong. And then, my own sister stood up and told the court I was unstable. But the most haunting part? They never expected my 9-year-old son to find their plan folded, hidden, printed out in black and white. Why would parents go that far? What kind of family builds a case to erase their own blood? And what happens when the quietest person in the room is the one holding the truth? I was pouring milk into Ella's cereal when the letter came. It slipped under the door. Just another envelope at first glance. I didn't think much of it, bills maybe. A school reminder. The light outside was still soft, not fully morning, and Ellis was humming some made-up tune between spoonfuls. He asked if Grandma would be coming to his school play next week. I told him I wasn't sure, knowing full well she wouldn't. Not anymore. Then I picked up the envelope. There was a county seal on the front. Heavy paper. My hands stopped moving. I read it once. Then again. My throat dried up. Petition for temporary custody. Filed by Alton and Vera Shipman, my parents. I must have made a noise, a small one, because Ellis looked up and asked if everything was okay. I smiled thin, too quick, and told him to finish his breakfast. My hand trembled as I tucked the letter behind the toaster, like hiding it would undo it. The rest of the morning moved in pieces. I packed Ellis lunch, walked him to school, even waved at the crossing guard like always. But the letter stayed in my head, loud as thunder. My own parents. Taking me to court, over my son. Back home, I sat at the kitchen table and tried to make sense of the timeline. We'd never been close. Vera made that clear years ago. She said I was dramatic, sensitive, not built for motherhood. I remembered her words after Ellis was born. You're exhausted because you make it hard on yourself. After the divorce, I let them visit Ellis sometimes. Supervised, brief. I thought I was being generous. I thought, maybe peace could be manufactured if I just kept the volume down. But peace wasn't what they wanted. They wanted control. And when they couldn't get it gently, they filed for it. I called Vera. It rang once before she picked up. Did you get the letter? She asked. No warmth. No pretense. You filed for custody, I said. It sounded absurd out loud. This isn't personal, Nadine, she said flatly. We're concerned. Concerned. That word again. A weapon dressed in etiquette. Alton came on the line, his voice clipped like he was giving instructions to a patient. We've consulted professionals. We just want what's best for Ellis. I am what's best for Ellis. It's not about you. I am your daughter. He didn't respond. The line clicked dead. I sat there for several minutes. My hand still holding the phone like it could pull answers through silence. Later that day, my court-appointed liaison emailed me a copy of the filing. Attachments included. A screenshot of an old Facebook post where I'd said, "Some days, I feel like I'm barely keeping up." A voicemail from 2 years ago, crying after Ellis had the flu for 5 nights straight. A private message I sent to a friend after the divorce. I don't know how to be everything at once. Those words scraped from my worst nights were now used as evidence. Emotional instability, social withdrawal, unfit to parent. They cut pieces out of my life, pasted them back together into a story I didn't recognize, then put their names at the bottom as narrators. Ellis came home that evening, excited about something they were building in art class. I nodded, asked questions, made dinner. He didn't notice I only picked at my food. When he fell asleep on the couch, still clutching the dog-eared book he refused to finish without me, I sat beside him and watched the rise and fall of his chest. So steady, so unaware. I opened the drawer beneath the TV stand. Slipped the court documents beside Ellis' birth certificate. 2 papers. One that brought him into this world, and one that tried to take him away from me. I thought I had lost enough. I whispered to the room, to the dark. I didn't know yet that what they wanted wasn't custody. It was erasure. The courthouse was colder than I expected. Not in temperature, though the air did bite a little, but in presence. It smelled like paper and polish, and everything echoed a bit too long. My heels clicked against the tile as I walked in, but when I entered the courtroom, I moved quieter, like noise might give them more ground. They were already seated when I arrived. Alton and Vera sat together, upright, faces unreadable. They didn't look at me, not even a flicker. To their right, Isolde's sister was flipping calmly through a thick binder, her hair pinned like she'd stepped out of a political commercial. I took my seat across from them. My hands rested in my lap, not shaking, just heavy. This wasn't confusion. This wasn't concern. This was premeditated. They hadn't come to court to express worry. They'd come to take. When Isolde was called to testify, I already knew what was coming. What I didn't expect was how clean it would sound. She spoke with that calm tone she'd perfected in board meetings and donor luncheons, sequel parts, gentle and firm. She's always had trouble with consistency, Isolde said. There were patterns even when we were teenagers. She'd start things, then drop them. She struggled to maintain boundaries. She mentioned missed lectures in college, a part-time job I quit after 3 weeks. My failure to attend Mom's charity gala the year I was dealing with postpartum fog. It's not about who Nadine is at her best, she said, looking at the judge. It's about who Ellis needs on his worst days. I didn't move. I didn't blink. I just stared straight ahead, trying to remember if it was this same woman who once held my hand when I was sobbing in the stairwell after failing my biology final, who once whispered, "You don't have to be them, Nadine." I guess I did have to be them if I wanted to stay in the family. The slideshow came next. Their lawyer called it family milestones. Images flashed across the screen. My parents cutting the ribbon at a new church wing. Isolde in cap and gown. Family vacations at national parks. Thanksgiving tables filled with smiles. I waited to see myself. I barely appeared. One Christmas photo showed me, blurry in the corner, reaching for a cup. In another, E'd been cropped out altogether. Ellis was shown smiling beside Isolde, her hand on his shoulder. My name wasn't said. My presence was erased. I looked toward the bench. The judge watched quietly, occasionally jotting notes. My own lawyer didn't object. It wasn't illegal to edit memories. I dug my nails into my palm, just to remind myself I still existed. 2 months earlier, E'd received a voicemail from Isolde. At the time, I didn't know what she was trying to say. "I always tried to shield you," she had said, "but now I need to protect what's left." What's left? That phrase burned more now. What was left, apparently, was the version of the family that didn't include me. The version that worked on paper. The one that looked tidy and predictable in court. Maybe they'd kept me on the edge all these years because they didn't know how to make me fit. Maybe it'd always been the draft copy they planned to revise out later. I realized then, my place in this family had always been conditional, and I broke the contract the moment I didn't self-destruct quietly. I thought about standing up, saying something, anything, but I didn't. Instead, I reached into my purse and found the crumpled piece of paper Ellis had drawn for me the week before. A sun, with a tiny house beneath it. Stick figures. One tall, one small, and a caption in crooked handwriting. "Mom and me. We don't need anyone else." I held on to that as the session wrapped. As Isolde laughed softly with the family attorney, I sat still. They didn't come to court to argue. They came to bury me in revision, in reputation, in silence. But I've buried enough pieces of myself for them already. Sunday came and left like a storm I wasn't allowed to name. Ellis was supposed to be dropped off at 6 p.m., like always. He'd cleaned his room earlier that day, folded his favorite blanket at the foot of the bed, even set aside a little plastic robot I found at the grocery store, something small to remind him this place still belonged to him. But 6 came and went. Then 7. Then 8. I called twice. No answer. I texted Vera. "Is he coming home tonight?" Read. No reply. By 9, I was in the car, driving the familiar route to their house. Every light red like the world itself had been told to wait. Their porch light was off. Curtains drawn. The car wasn't in the driveway. Nothing stirred. Back home, I sat on Ellis' bed and stared at the digital clock beside his nightlight, 10:47 p.m. I whispered into the voicemail box after the fourth try, trying to keep my voice calm for the record, though my stomach had dropped hours ago. Has not a prize. Has a person. Has my son. I hung up. The silence afterward felt intentional. The next morning, I got a call from the school front desk. Not from Vera. Not from Alton. From the receptionist, polite but confused. "Hi, Ms. Shipman. Ellis was dropped off this morning by his grandmother, and he forgot his lunch. Just making sure someone's bringing it?" That was how I found out my son had been returned. I drove straight there, heart in my throat, lunch in my lap. At the front office, I saw Vera walking out. She didn't look surprised to see me. She didn't even blink. "He seemed more peaceful with us," she said, adjusting her scarf. "It was better that way." I smiled. I didn't know how else to keep from screaming. Inside the school, Ellis ran to hug me like nothing happened. And maybe, to him, nothing had. But to me, everything did. Because when people start making decisions for you, especially about your own child, they've already decided you don't matter. By Wednesday, our next court update was logged in the shared system. I logged in through the portal and scrolled through the newly added affidavits. One line stood out. Evidence of emotional distancing initiated by respondent. There were message screenshots included. A thread between me and Ellis, cropped at just the right places. One line, taken entirely out of context. "Stay close to me. They don't know you like I do." I remembered that message. It was from when he told me Vera had scolded him for crying after a bad dream. I had comforted him, told him his feelings were safe with me. That line, now presented as emotional manipulation, made my chest burn. They weren't just trying to take Ellis. They were trying to paint me as obsessive, possessive, dangerous. Their strategy wasn't legal, it was narrative. They weren't just trying to win. They were trying to rewrite me. That night, Ellis curled beside me on the couch. We were watching one of those old cartoons he liked, something loud and fast, colors flashing every second. But he wasn't really watching. He looked up at me, then away, then back again. "They told me not to call you," he said quietly. "They said you'd be upset." I didn't say anything. I just pulled him closer, my arms wrapping around his shoulders, like a net trying to hold back the ocean. When your child starts choosing who not to hurt, you realize he's already had to grow up. He fell asleep halfway through the show, head against my chest. I watched the light of the screen flicker across his face and wondered how much he understood. Probably more than he should. After tucking him into bed, I opened my laptop. I started collecting things, not just emotions, documents, screenshots, dates, voicemails, school reports. I opened a folder titled Custody Defense and began dropping them in. I saved one of Ellis' journal entries from school. He'd written, in that half-print, half-cursive style of 9-year-olds, "Mom loves me even when I cry. That's how I know she's mine." It felt like a lifeline. I looked at the calendar. Court resumed in 5 days. They wanted to erase me with ink and paper, but I'd answer them with the only thing they didn't expect: the truth. Ellis ran up to me outside the school with the kind of excitement that made you forget for a second everything was falling apart. "Look what Grandma and Grandpa got me!" He held out a shiny new handheld game console one I recognized instantly. It was the same model I'd ordered for him weeks ago, after saving up from a side project I'd done for a local bakery. I'd spent 20 minutes comparing prices, 20 more picking out a case with little cartoon planets on it. But when the package never showed up at my apartment, I assumed it had gotten lost in the holiday shuffle. I smiled, even as my stomach sank. "That's cool, buddy," I said, masking the recognition. "Grandma said they got it just for me, 'cause I've been so good." His voice was bright, full of belief. I waited until after bedtime. Once Ellis was asleep, I pulled up my inbox and searched the tracking number. Delivered to their address. 3 days ago. They had taken the gift I bought, wrapped it in their affection, and handed it to him like they were the givers. Like I was absent. like I didn't exist. It wasn't just a toy. It was affection redirected, intimacy repackaged. Later that night, as I rinsed dinner plates and put away leftovers, I asked gently, "How did it feel staying at their place this time?" He didn't look up from the kitchen table. "Fine, just fine. They have better snacks, and I can watch whatever." I dried my hands, turned to face him. "Do you feel safe there?" His head bobbed in an almost imperceptible nod. Too quick. Practiced. I didn't ask more. You don't ask a child to choose safety over comfort. You just pay attention to the answers they're not ready to give. After he went to bed, I started sorting through a storage bin in the hallway closet, just to feel like I had control over something. Under a pile of old bibs and formula coupons, I found a yellowed envelope addressed in my handwriting. It was still sealed. I'd written it to my mother, sometime during those early weeks when Ellis wouldn't sleep for more than 90 minutes at a time. My breasts ached, my hair matted, my eyes hollow. I'd written it at the kitchen table at 3 a.m., too afraid to call, too angry to ask for help. "I know I'm not perfect," the letter began, "but I want you to see me. Just see me." I sat on the floor of the hallway and read the whole thing, still sealed, reading through the thin paper. My handwriting curved nervously back then, like even my words were afraid to take up space. I never mailed it. I guess deep down, I knew it wouldn't be read even if I had. That kind of grief doesn't make you cry. It just takes up space inside you and lives there. I folded the envelope back, placed it on the coffee table. I couldn't throw it out. I couldn't deliver it either. I opened my old phone, an older model, cracked at the corner but still functional, and started the camera. It wasn't for court. It wasn't for the lawyer. It was for me. "I don't know what else they'll take," I said into the screen. "But if they keep coming, they're going to find out what happens when you try to erase someone who has nothing left to lose." I saved the video. Didn't send it anywhere. Some truths weren't meant for others to judge. They were meant to keep you steady when the floor moved. The next morning, I dressed in silence, made coffee, packed Ellis lunch. As I reached for my coat, I tucked the letter, the one I'd written years ago, the one no one ever read, into the inner pocket. It didn't change the court's evidence list, but I wasn't walking into that building empty-handed anymore. That letter was never opened. But this story? I won't let them write the last page. The courtroom had a stillness that felt less like silence and more like watching a storm creep in through a sealed window. I sat straighter than I needed to, hands folded, listening to the shuffle of papers and the faint cough of someone behind me. Then they called him, Dr. Harlan Vexley. He walked in like he'd been here before, confident, polished, voice steady. A man used to being believed. A man who never had to explain the spaces between his words. He was introduced as a licensed psychologist, brought in to provide an objective behavioral assessment. But I'd never seen him, never spoken to him, and he had never met Ellis. Still, he spoke with authority, quoting vague studies and naming patterns like inconsistent maternal response and attachment disorganization due to emotional volatility. I felt my shoulders stiffen. Ellis was being discussed like a case file, like a collection of checkboxes. The judge asked no questions. My lawyer leaned over, whispered, "Let me do the talking." I nodded, because my voice was already being overwritten in real time. Dr. Vexley claimed Ellis displayed hesitation in relational alignment, that his drawings showed maternal anxiety symbolism, whatever that meant. My son draws dragons and planets 9. Then came the dagger. In my professional opinion, the child's current living environment may be contributing to developmental confusion and emotional unpredictability. I stared at him, my pulse so loud I could barely hear his next sentence. Not once did he say the word love. When it was our turn, my attorney stood and asked plainly, "Dr. Vexley, have you ever observed Ms. Shipman in person?" "No." "Have you ever spoken directly to Ellis Shipman?" "No." "Then your entire testimony is based on documents provided by the plaintiff, correct?" "Correct." It should have been enough to break him, but it wasn't, because he didn't need facts, just tone. Words like concern, emerging patterns, suggestive behaviors. They floated in the air, dressed like science, but built like insinuation. I sat there, letting each phrase land, letting each pause underline what no one dared say out loud. She is the problem. The judge nodded, made a note. That's all it took. Then came Exhibit B. The plaintiff's counsel handed over a folder marked historical medical concerns. Inside was a document I recognized and didn't. A postpartum evaluation from when Ellis was a newborn. Only it wasn't accurate. The name of the clinic was correct. The counselor's name, yes. But the date was off by a year. And the language? The words weren't mine. It described prolonged episodes of detachment, refusal to breastfeed, and disassociation under stress. I remembered my sessions. They were hard, but I showed up. I cried, I talked. But I was never diagnosed. I was told I was tired, human, new. I leaned in, whispering to my lawyer, "That's not real. That's not what was written." He nodded once, raised his hand. The judge paused and agreed to review the original medical record before ruling on the exhibit's admissibility. But the seed was planted, and they knew it. I didn't react. I didn't flinch. I let the accusation hang in the air and chose to respond with something harder than anger, stillness. Because that's what they were trying to steal. My calm. Vera sat across from me, writing notes like she was documenting a museum display. Isolde sat beside her, arms folded, like she'd already accepted the judge's ruling. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. Their silence was its own declaration. But I wasn't sitting for them. I was sitting for Ellis. I took a breath. They wanted me to crumble, to fit the frame they built. But I wasn't going to oblige them. I could feel the shape of my strength now. Not loud, not sharp, just there. After court, I drove home without music. Ellis was with a sitter. The house felt too still, but for once that wasn't a threat. It was room. I opened the drawer beside my bed and pulled out the file I'd started 3 weeks earlier. Pay stubs, teacher notes, Ellis attendance record, photos of birthday cakes made in my kitchen, a note from his dentist. No missed appointments. I laid them out like armor. They wanted to bury me under paperwork. I'd answer with mine. And this time, the words would be true. The first thing I noticed was the phrasing. I had gone down to the courthouse clerk's office to request copies of recent filings. It was a routine part of this hellish process, now more folders, more ink, more words meant to reduce my motherhood to a mistake. I was skimming through the latest motion when the language stopped me cold. In a section labeled Custodial Notes, Ellis was referred to as the child of the respondent. Not her son, not Ellis Shipman, just that clinical, distant, and deliberate. The same way you'd describe a missing briefcase or a misplaced invoice. I kept reading. In the part where the court typically lists primary caregiver, the line beside my name was left blank. Blank. I blinked, reread it, and set the paper down slowly, careful not to crumple the edge like it was something alive. My fingers felt colder than they should have, and the room, the beige walls, the fluorescent lighting suddenly pressed in on me like a sealed box. I walked out into the sharp air of the parking lot and sat in my car without turning the engine on. The word respondent echoed louder than the heater ever could. Later that afternoon, I picked Ellis up from school. He was waiting by the main entrance, swinging his backpack like nothing in his world had shifted. His cheeks were red from the cold, his smile unbothered. "They taught us a new song in music today. You want to hear it?" I nodded. "Of course." He hummed the first few bars as we walked to the car. It was off-key and perfect. I didn't mention the document. I couldn't, because no matter what language the court used, he still called me Mom. At home, I made dinner while he sprawled on the floor, half playing, half humming. I offered to help him clean out his backpack before he returned to his grandparents the next morning. He groaned but agreed. "Let me grab it," he said, dragging it toward the table. As we unzipped compartments and dug through snack wrappers and folded worksheets, something caught my eye. A folded piece of paper tucked in a hidden zipper pouch on the back. "What's this?" Ellis paused. His face went still. "I don't know if I was supposed to take it. I found it at Grandpa House, behind the desk." I opened it slowly. The page was printed, the header marked with a date from 2 months prior. Guardianship Strategy, Contingency Plan A. My vision narrowed. Paragraph after paragraph laid out talking points, phrases to use in court, strategies to emotionally distance Ellis from me while maintaining the appearance of moral clarity. It was signed digitally by someone from a private law office I hadn't heard of before. Ellis stood silently, waiting. I folded the paper shut. "Why didn't you show me sooner?" He hesitated, then said, "I didn't want to make things worse." I thought, maybe it'd be better to wait, for when it really mattered. That undid me. I crouched down, pulled him into my arms, and finally let myself cry. Not loudly, not with drama. Just enough that he felt it on the side of his neck, where my cheek rested. I've been collecting receipts, I thought, but he collected the truth. I didn't ask more. I didn't need to. Whatever instincts I had that were supposedly unstable had raised a boy who knew the weight of silence and when to break it. After he fell asleep, I sat at the dining table with the letter open again. I read every word twice. I scanned it, saved it to a secure folder, and emailed it to my lawyer with a subject line that read, "Found by Ellis. Confirm admissibility." Then I whispered something aloud, to no one. They made their move. Now I'll make mine. I slipped the paper into a plastic sleeve and filed it in my binder. A quiet weapon, because no one expects a mother to fight back with silence, until that silence holds their secrets. The manila folder under my arm felt heavier than it was. I clutched it like armor as I walked into the courtroom that morning, my heels firm against the tile floor. Not fast, not slow, just deliberate. My attorney met me at the table, already aware. "We got the confirmation," he said, nodding toward the folder. "It's admissible." I didn't smile. I didn't need to. I just placed the folder gently in front of him, like it was a torch ready to burn everything down. Across the aisle, Alton sat stiffly. His mouth was tight. Vera was too busy pretending to take notes to make eye contact. Isolde looked at her phone, poised like this was just another meeting to get through. But I watched my father's jaw shift when the judge called for the submitted material to be read aloud. "Counsel, please proceed with Exhibit 12, the judge said. My lawyer stood. "Your Honor, this document was recovered by the minor child and brought forward by the respondent. It is titled Guardianship Strategy, Contingency, Plan A." The clerk handed copies to the judge and the opposing table. There was a silence before the judge began to read. Ensure emotional framing that highlights respondent's instability without initiating direct character attacks. Utilize third-party testimony to support concern narrative. Suggested language, "We just want what's best." Every word was another nail in the coffin they built for me. Goal, minimize her legal standing while retaining public moral clarity. Consider alternative custody framing that favors consistency over primary parental rights. My father shifted. His attorney leaned in and whispered something. Vera stared forward, her pen frozen over an empty notepad. I didn't gloat. I didn't move. I just let the words fill the room like smoke. They had tried to erase me in a courtroom built to pretend everyone had a voice, but they wrote their plan in ink. And I brought the original script. When recess was called, I stepped out into the hallway, needing air without judgment. I stood by the vending machine, mostly for the hum. Sometimes it helped drown the thoughts. Then I heard her heels. Doreen Mackey, our neighbor. The same woman who'd stood in court last month and said she heard yelling and erratic behavior from my apartment. The same woman who forgot I helped her fix a busted garbage disposal in the middle of February. She hesitated near me, clutching her purse. I was told she began. They said you were unstable, That you might lose it in court. I looked at her. Not hard, not kind, just honest. And? She swallowed. Your father helped us out last spring, paid for the roof repairs when we didn't qualify for the loan. I nodded once. You know what it's like to depend on someone? I said softly, until it stops being help and starts being obedience. She blinked, then looked away. I didn't chase her apology. She wasn't the first to fold, and I was done collecting regret. Back inside, my attorney and I regrouped. The judge's tone had changed, still formal, but now professionally distant from the other side. Like the robe was finally doing what the law was designed to do. Listen. Well, use the letter as grounds to review the timeline of previous testimony, my lawyer said. And that recording Ellis made? We're going to push for it next. I nodded. For the first time since this started, I wasn't just defending myself. I was defining the narrative. I didn't speak to Alton or Vera as I walked past them that afternoon. Their table looked smaller now, their eyes tired. Ellis' drawing folded and tucked inside my bag felt like a declaration now, not a comfort. They didn't expect the letter to speak, but now the silence belongs to them. It was a Friday, but not the kind that promised weekend relief. The courthouse air was sterile, cold, but it carried a kind of weight like a closing argument that had already been written by something greater than law. Every step I took echoed louder than it should have. Every glance felt like a judgment. Ellis' hand was wrapped tightly around mine as we stepped into that courtroom. His fingers were small but certain. In my other hand, tucked into my bag, was the letter, the one they never meant for me to find. The one Ellis had quietly protected, tucked into his sketch folder like a secret too big for his little heart. My lawyer, Mr. Rosenthal, met me at our table. He didn't say much, just a nod. But it was enough. There was nothing left to rehearse. The moment had arrived. The judge asked if we had anything further to submit before final statements. His voice was neutral, procedural, but there was an edge. He already sensed the shift in the air. We do, Rosenthal replied, his tone low but steady. He reached into the folder and produced the letter with careful hands, as though it were something sacred. A letter, Your Honor, and a supplemental audio file for the court's consideration. The judge tilted his head slightly, signaling for the clerk. The other side of the courtroom shifted like a tide breaking. The opposing counsel began flipping papers they hadn't written, hadn't prepared for. Alton, my father, tugged at his collar. Vera, always the composed one, with her faux professional notebook, looked like she might actually need it now. Let's proceed, the judge said, peering over his glasses. The clerk pressed play. It began with static then, scratchy, almost like the silence before a storm. And then my father's voice came through, clear, calm, calculated. If we win this, he said, she can't touch him again. That's the only way to be sure. The courtroom didn't erupt, but it cracked. You could feel it. A collective breath held, then shattered. It landed like a hammer on tile. I didn't move. I didn't turn around to watch the faces. I kept my eyes on the judge. Then, softer, a second voice, Ellis. Just one line. I don't think Mom's bad. Just that. But sometimes a whisper reveals more truth than 1,000 accusations. The audio cut out. No music, no fade. Just silence, so sharp it rang in your ears. The judge sat back slowly, removing his glasses and folding them in deliberate silence. For a long moment, he said nothing. This court, he finally began, has reviewed the newly submitted evidence. In light of this audio file, the accompanying letter, and the surrounding implications, I find the plaintiff's credibility to be compromised. There it was. Alton didn't move. Vera stared straight ahead, jaw clenched. Isolde blinked like the light was suddenly too much. All their certainty, their smug coordination, seemed to flicker. I will not be awarding custody to the petitioners, the judge continued. In fact, I am ordering an immediate investigation into the conduct of this case. This includes a full review for possible witness coercion, document tampering, and psychological manipulation. Each word struck like a gavel on their empire of deception. I felt air return to my lungs, not in a gasp, but in slow, measured increments, like my body didn't fully trust that the fight was over. "My son will remain with me," I whispered. It wasn't for anyone else to hear, just for myself. And this time, I believed it. When I stood, my legs didn't feel shaky. They felt rooted. I left that courtroom the way I came, dignified, upright, but I wasn't the same woman. This time, I wasn't walking into battle. I was walking out with something they thought they could take from me. In the hallway, Isolde passed by without meeting my eyes. Vera muttered something bitter. "You were lucky, I think." I didn't respond. Luck doesn't scan documents. Luck doesn't record audio. And luck didn't hand me that letter. Ellis did. Just outside the courthouse, he ran up to me, his coat flapping open, drawing folder clutched under his arm like it held the world. "Did we win?" he asked. I knelt down, brushing the hair from his forehead, looking into the eyes of the boy who had held onto more than just a drawing. "We told the truth," I said. He nodded like that was all he needed. Maybe for him it was. As we crossed the parking lot, I reached into my pocket and touched the letter again. Folded, worn at the edges. It wasn't written for court, but it carried more weight than all the affidavits and motions combined. That letter didn't appear on any official timeline, but it rewrote everything. They built a story without me. I just tore out the last chapter. Justice gave me space to breathe. Healing, though? That would be the long walk home. One step at a time. But now, at least, I could begin it on my own terms, with Ellis beside me, and no lies left between us. 2 weeks after the ruling, the house was still quiet in the mornings. The difference was, I could hear the quiet now, without wondering what else they might take from me. Ellis sat at the kitchen table, legs swinging beneath the chair, spooning cereal into his mouth like it was just another Tuesday. Because to him, it was. No court today, no suit to iron, no folder to double-check. Just him and me, and the sound of a spoon tapping a ceramic bowl. I didn't bring up the verdict. I didn't bring up the silence from the other side either. No phone call, no message, no dramatic fallout. Except for one thing. Isolde had sent an email. 2 words. "I understand." I never responded. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can say is nothing at all. Later that week, I walked Ellis to school. A neighbor who hadn't so much as looked at me in 6 months gave a soft wave as she trimmed her front hedge. A mom from Ellis' class leaned toward me at pickup and whispered, "You were braver than most of us would have been." I nodded. Not because I believed it, but because I was still trying to figure out what bravery even meant anymore. Alton and Vera still went to church every Sunday, still hosted community luncheons, still smiled in photos with their mouths pressed into a line that only looked like joy if you didn't know them. Pretending like nothing happened was their specialty. But I knew, and they knew I knew. People don't always have to say they're sorry to feel shame. Sometimes silence is their sentence. I hadn't been back to their house, not since all of this started, but I passed it once last week, driving Ellis home from school. The curtains were drawn, the yard too neat. Ellis didn't ask to stop. That night, I dreamed he stood at the edge of their driveway, holding the letter again, the one they never meant for me to see. But in the dream, he didn't hand it to me. He let it go, and the wind carried it away while he walked toward me without a word. I woke up and opened the drawer where I kept his birth certificate. The letter was there too, locked away. Not for revenge, just for remembrance. We didn't talk about court anymore. He didn't ask if Grandpa would ever call. I didn't offer an answer I couldn't stand behind. But healing isn't loud. It's not clean. It moves like water, quiet and unshaped, until it finds its way through. One evening, Ellis came to me with a folded paper in his hands. His cheeks were pink from the cold, his fingers slightly smudged with marker ink. He unfolded the drawing slowly. A house. A sun. 2 stick figures holding hands. Underneath, in his uneven print, "Home is not where people say it is. It's where someone waits for you." I didn't ask who told him that. I didn't ask if it came from a teacher or a book or just his own heart. I just pulled him close and whispered into his hair, "He'll always wait for you." Some promises are too big for courtrooms. This morning, I walked to work my new part-time job at the local community office. It's nothing fancy, filing, phones. But the chair's stable, and no one looks at me like I need to explain the past. I stopped by the corner grocery on the way home, grabbed a bag of fruit, and paused on the sidewalk as the wind picked up. The sky was bruised with winter, but I breathed easier than I had in a long time. They tried to take my name off the record, but my son made sure I was never forgotten. Some stories don't end with revenge. They end when someone chooses peace over silence. In the end, this wasn't just about custody. It wasn't even about courtrooms or legal strategy. It was about being seen, being heard, and refusing to let anyone, no matter how close, rewrite your worth. If you're a parent, a daughter, a survivor of a quiet war like mine, I want you to remember this. Silence can be strength, but only if you use it wisely. You don't have to scream to reclaim your name. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is stand your ground with truth in your hands and love in your voice. I wasn't erased. I was rewritten by my own resilience and by the child who never stopped calling me Mom. Now I'd love to hear from you. Have you ever been made to feel invisible by the very people who should have supported you? How did you find your way back to yourself? Drop your thoughts in the comments to read every single one. And hey, if this video touched you, helped you feel seen, or made you think of someone you love, leave a comment with the number 1, or tell me what city or state you're watching from. And if you didn't connect with the story, let me know why. This space is for honest conversation, not just agreement. If you want more stories like this, real, raw, and deeply human, make sure you subscribe to the channel so you don't miss what's coming next. Because healing doesn't happen in silence. It happens in stories. Let's keep telling them, together.